Welcome to the Culture of You, meaningful dialogue with me and my favorite people. Welcome everyone to the Culture of You. I am your host, Karen Hewitt, and I have a very, very special guest with me today. This is Suzanne Roberts, and they are my mentor. I met them. I never really understand time when it comes to Suzanne, but I met them about 5 years ago, and I was doing a lot of work, emotional intelligence. I'm pretty much a personal development junkie, which thankfully I'm working in that space. But I met Suzanne and I learned about polarity. And polarity for me is like connecting with the life inside of you. That's like a one sentence thing that I could say about polarity. It's so much more than that. It's a lot deeper. It's in all the work that I'm doing right now. I will say that polarity yoga probably saved a lot of folks from experiencing me in my anger or rage or ether. It taught me how to ground in so many ways. And over the last few years, I've been able to work with Suzanne for the Anti-Racism Collective. And Suzanne is the principal at Unifying Solutions, which does anti-racism work, which does polarity work, which does individual coaching. My favorite assessment that is done really overall is the Phoebe, and it's an energy-based indicator, and Suzanne facilitates that. An incredible one-on-one coach, collective power person, somatic practice instruction expert, and my life is so much richer because of Suzanne in it. And Suzanne is like one of those people that will look into your soul and say something, and then you're like, okay, well, now I have to go process that or just sit with that. And I'm so glad you all get to connect and learn a little bit more about Suzanne and our relationship. And I'm just so excited about having you here today. And this will be a slower paced talk because we're going to talk about what is emerging and what is present. But it's all going to be from the life inside of us. And so, Suzanne, thank you for being here with me. I would love for you to say anything maybe I missed, maybe a licensure or something I missed. I don't know. But also mention why you chose to come on this podcast with me today.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having me today. It's interesting. I could add certifications I have or things that I do. That's really not what's that interesting to me. What's interesting is who am I within all those things? And I think that's what I'm always working to cultivate is me becoming a better human being. So that's what's interesting to share about myself. I think that why am I here today? First of all, because I love you and I believe in you, and I'm so excited about the culture of you. And I'm also excited to share both like how we are in relationship with each other. I think that's really vital and interesting. And I also excited to share about what polarity can mean for so many different domains. Mm-hmm. And what how I see healing and restful transformative justice.
That might be a new term you just coined there.
Restful transformative justice. I'm going to jot that down.
Please do. We'll take it into our next phase of work. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about like the work that we do together. And your experience of it with the Anti-Racism Collective and Polarity. If you want to expound on that, I would love for people to hear from you what Polarity is, and you can take your time with that, and a little bit about the work that we do with the Anti-Racism Collective.
I'll start with the Anti-Racism Collective. I'm just going to say I met Dr. Sierra Austin, I think 8 or 9 years ago when she was at the YWCA, and she and I partnered together with James A. White to bring something called Safe Conversations About Race, but it was in our dialogue with each other that Dr. Sierra and I found out that we had a shared passion for, racial justice and racial equity. And as time went on, one of the things that happens with me a lot is people start bringing me in for different things. So an
Hmm.
organization brought me in to start doing some DEI work, and I got a hold of Dr. Sierra, and then I met you, and I said, Dr. Sierra, can we bring Karen in? And then we took some time really sitting with what is it that we're about? Like, we didn't just say we're not, what is it that we bring together, and what is it that we bring collectively together with our shared intelligence in terms of healing and equity and anti-racism. And I think that we have a unique offer. I think that working together, all of us hold our own accountability to keep unpacking inside of ourselves. For me, how white supremacy has gotten internalized inside of me.
Hmm.
Like, so I keep looking at how do I protect my superiority and my comfort, and how does that show up, and every day I keep checking on that. So,
Right.
and each of you keep unpacking the internalized socialization about being less than, or, not wanted, or whatever all the messages it could be. And for each of us, we have a shared agreement to both thrive and radiate as powerfully as possible and be the best versions of ourselves, which is your coined language, but also to be in what you call right relationship with each other. So I know that if I'm off, you'll let me know, and then I'll go do my work, and I can say to you, do you want to know about my work? And most of the time you say no. And, and then you just know I'm going to do it, but I also know you're going to do it. And there's something about that shared accountability that we agree to and we do on our own. And it produces so much more vibrancy with us, because we're not carrying each other's weight, I guess is what I would say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that, because I know specifically for the anti-racism collective, there came a time after we had done a lot of, curation, because we tailor each workshop you know, phase, I guess I would say, of the work for the organization. We tailor it to each organization.
Yeah.
And I know there was a time, because for a while I was part-time. People are like, where are you at? Where are you working with me? But like I was part-time with my current job, and then I was part-time consulting. Like, so it was a lot of consulting, a lot of clients, and we were doing a lot of curation and
Yeah.
conversations. And at one point, I just remember us having the conversation about like me and Sierra's exhaustion. And Dr. Sierra does a lot, she's a professor. She does all this stuff. I do a lot of leadership development, I do art, I do all kinds of things. It's a slow burn. We're letting people know, about me over the course of multiple episodes and stuff like that. But when we talked about, and it was one specific client, and we were in a space where there was only one Black person in
Mhm.
their senior leadership group that we were working with. And we were pretty exhausted, because a lot of times it's the first time that a Black person or an Indigenous person or a person of the melanated sort gets a chance to unpack how that socialization lives inside of them without having to do that with the white gaze, right? So they can do that with
Yep.
me and Dr. Sierra, and we just hold that space,
Yep.
because it's it's not crippling. It's mind blowing in a way where you're like, oh my goodness, I'm perpetuating this too. Right. And we were like, okay, Suzanne, would it be possible if you create the itineraries and you just let us, like, we need you to conduct here.
Mhm.
We need you to conduct, because we're a little bit tired of the whole process, like the curation, the
Right.
meeting, all of that stuff. Would it be okay if you conduct? And some people did see it as like, oh, the white woman's leading and
Mhm.
they're just here. So can you talk a little bit about that, like from your end, and what it meant to kind of shift the way we do things, because we had been doing that for about a year. But we shifted kind of everything.
I'm not sure what you're asking here, but I'll answer what's coming up in me right now is
Yeah.
like being able to stay in myself to grow empathy for your exhaustion is part of my work.
Hmm.
Being able to let that impact me. One, to feel the weight of that and the exhaustion, and to shore up me carrying the weight and taking on that responsibility and that accountability. And what's so interesting within that, also the one Black person was also exhausted, being the only one on the team. So there was like multiple levels of exhaustion in multiple ways,
Hmm.
right? And then also walking into a space where it is predominantly white, how much work I have to do to not join that space because I'm socialized
Mm.
to join that space, right? And so in that space, I'm also working to make sure I'm staying connected to both of you, and that I'm not getting into the white supremacy haze, is what I call it.
Yeah.
um, but and it's so interesting how people perceive it versus they're not actually reading us, because
Right.
we're actually okay. But if you're only looking at visuals, it looks one way. And
Mm.
that's its own thing in and of itself, because we had clear shared agreement and harmony between us, and there really wasn't a tone or force of domination or trying
Hmm.
to exclude you or disappear you. It was trying to hold space for you to rest, and that's a very different field than like, I'm going to dominate here, right? And so
Oh my God. Yeah.
right, so how people don't have, one of the things I love about you so much is your ability to hold so much nuance and complexity, and people don't know how to do that. And you have, to me, you have the sensitivity and the awareness to stay a feeling person in a space, but also see. And that
Mm-hmm.
is, that's a rare combination, to have both of those things. And other people don't have that skill set, and so they just use their eyes and look. And when you're
Yeah.
only using your eyes and look, you're not connecting to the rest of you, the rest of your intelligences, or even checking your own whiteness. None of that's getting done.
Well, right. And I think about this from like an ally conversation, right? And what I do know is that many of the super liberal, maybe even some would say they're progressive, like separate, liberal, progressive white folks in my life, a lot of times they're like, "Did you ask the Black people?" And I'm like looking around and I'm like, "Me? Like, are are you asking me if I asked the Black people?" Like, yeah. Like, I'm connected to that, and I think, instead
Mm,
of and it's like instead of being like, "Are you 2 okay?" So we wound up, transparently telling them, because we kinda knew that some of that would happen and that there would be some challenge and pushback, and, like, your voice was gonna lead the conversation, but we wanted that, right? And so it was interesting because it was like, "All right, what do we do in this space? We have to let them know that this is our shared agreement, because they're not gonna just pick it up." And
right,
then we were also like, "This is how we wanted it." This does not mean that in every situation or
right.
in every space, that is gonna be what is wanted. And I think we get lost sometimes in like the made up table in our heads of like oppression Olympics, and like who should talk and who has more oppression and who should be able to talk when and who should be leading the conversation.
Yeah,
And it's like, no, like there's some nuance in that too. And like for this space and this time, it was important that we mirrored and we naturally understood what that one Black person was going through, because
hmm,
we were in a similar
yeah,
field of whiteness, right? And so that requires more to stay connected to the collective field, because it's fighting the dominant energy in the room.
yeah,
And so in that space, we needed to be less in the vocal and leadership role, and it needed to be like, Karen, talk about this. Sierra, talk about this. And we needed it to be that clear and that easy for us. But in other spaces, when there's 50% or more racial diversity in the room, then it gets a little different. And then we may
Yep.
be able to lead in different ways. But that's not always as accessible and as possible when there's dominant whiteness in the room. And that's not to say that dominant whiteness can't happen in a room with a majority of
Oh, right.
Black folks or indigenous folks or people of color. Like, that's not to say that at all, because that can still happen. It's just to say that each individual situation is going to be different.
Hmm. I think when you're talking, one of the things that came up for me too is we've talked about this, is how um, I like to be around people that are smarter than me so that I can grow and then know more than me. And both you and Karen, and Dr. Sierra definitely know more than me. It's not just different things, it's more, and you're experts in ways that I'm not. And I love that. And there are times when we're together though, and it's
Mm.
you're in your flow, and it's like mic dropping and life changing and heart spirit opening, and there will I mean, like, just like on the United Way thing, I was like, preach, Karen, preach, like, if you all haven't listened to it, please go listen to it. So but I experience what I call white threat, like, because the natural hierarchy, not the natural, the historically shaping hierarchy is that I'm supposed to be in front, right? And so I'm supposed to be dominant, and I'm supposed to be smarter. And philosophically, I don't think that way. And emotionally, I don't think that way, feel that way. But I have been socialized that way, whether I like it or not. And this is when you have to, as a white person, lay down that you're a good person, or you have the right philosophy, or you emotionally intelligent, and sit there and go, I'm actually feeling threatened here right now. And let me just take a moment here and breathe, because I want them to shine. But there is a grab inside. It's a flinch. And then I have to settle it down and remember my deeper commitment that if I didn't do that piece of work, I would do one of the 4 Ds. I would either try to dismiss what you're saying, discredit what you're saying, demonize you, or maybe some way destroy you, talk about you publicly, or it comes out in weird ways if we don't do that check inside.
It
So
does. It
yeah.
does. And I think, thank you for mentioning the 4 Ds. Byron Allen talks about that, and how in all the spaces, because whiteness is historically set up like it is, what that also means is that in any space where there's hierarchy or there's dominance, which is a lot of spaces we work in, all of that, is that Black people especially, because anti-Blackness is global, but then any person that is different than whiteness, or showing up in whiteness, right, could be dismissed, discredited, demonized, and then ultimately destroyed. If you think about all the people that have risen up, or all the people that have been advocates, especially in the anti-Black space, eventually that puts a little target on you. And those type of things happen. And I think we had one situation, and you were like, I'm experiencing white threat right now. And you said it in front of like the crowd. And I know for me, like, not that I avoid conflict. That's, Black culture, like, we gonna say the thing. But I've always been the quiet one in those situations. Like, I've always been the one to kind of internalize those moments where maybe I was impacted, because I freeze. Like, that's one of my adaptive responses. Like, I freeze. And in that moment, I was like, you almost feel like you're in trouble for saying the truth, or like saying what's right or what's going on. And you were able to say, I have some white threat right now. And then I was like, okay.
Right.
So that means I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Like, I'm
Right.
shining, or at some point, I get sick of Black excellence, but like I'm trying to, if I'm trying to deliver a message and it's landing, and then you're like, wow, that was really smooth. That was really intelligent. That was really brilliant
Life changing.
synthesizing. Yeah, you're like, that's brilliant. And I'm like, I'm not used to hearing that either. So there's like a
Mm.
whole experience that happens I'm used to hearing that more now. And I'll attribute that to all the spaces I'm in and all the beautiful things that are happening in life. But I also know that at times it can be like overwhelming in the moment because I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do?
Mhm.
I love that about all of that. And these are some of the things that like shared language we have when we're doing trainings. And
Yeah.
we kind of came to a conclusion, and I loved that conclusion at the end of 2021. And that conclusion was that we weren't going to go to which organizations. So I'll let you say it in the way you interpreted it, because I kind of delivered it and then you were like, okay, we won't go. So what's our vetting process for people that we work with?
Well, we don't want to break people in to uh, have to understand that racism is real, that, it's harmful. We don't want to have to do that part of the process. We want people that are understand the harm of anti-Blackness, understand that racial harm is happening every single day, to understand they have a understanding of microaggressions and gaslighting, and we're not doing education about the basic things. I call them basic things. Maybe they're not basic for some people, but that there's a readiness to actually really want to do the work, number one. And number two is that senior leadership is invested,
Hmm.
because to come in and do work with other levels and the senior leadership isn't invested, it gets sandwiched, and it actually could be harmful to people that are trying to do the work internally, but the senior people don't want it done. So it's more of a vetting process like that. And also, um, I just think we're also looking at what's possible next to um, create forward motion, I guess is what I would think about. I mean, one of the
Yeah,
things I think we're passionate about is how do we make it more possible for Black women to lead, and what's the harm to Black women leaders that do lead, and how can we make it more safe and vibrant and people ready for Black women to lead.
I love
So
that. And I know in the space we also talk about, so, and this may be something we need to be transparent about as far as like queerness and gender and fluidity. We both have this fluidity about us, that,
yeah.
not that it doesn't matter. Like, let me be clear about that. But we've done, both of us, a lot of work around gender, and um obviously we're continuing to do the work of race. That work will, it's so socialized into us that will never leave us, right? Even to the smallest degree. And that's the hope, is to get it to the smallest degree before
Yeah.
we leave this realm. But like gender wise, we say Black women and like queerness is my politics as well, right? But like
Hmm.
how, we transcend that almost in a way that is not like, oh, I transcend this because I'm God or I'm anything like that. It's like, no, we have God in us. And I'm transcending gender. But like that also means for Black women to lead, um, Black trans folks to
Right.
lead, Black queer folks to lead. What does it mean? But we don't even really have a ton of Black women leading.
Right.
We have, Forbes says, two in the top five Fortune 500 companies are Black women leaders, so like we haven't even as a society gotten to the point where we can talk really beyond just Black women
Right.
at the
Right.
hierarchy, if you call it a totem pole or whatever, in terms of how the society has created that. So like the fact that we have to say Black women, and that's, to me at this point, mostly in corporate spaces or organizational spaces, the conversation really is rarely Black queer women, because that's not
Right.
even who's in the room, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Or
Right.
Black trans women, like unheard of, right? Like in
Right.
in that
Right.
room. And so it's interesting to me that you said Black women, not from a, I can't recall a lot of examples where we're talking about Black queer folks.
Right.
And so that's so interesting. That kind of impacted me in that moment.
Mm.
Hmm.
I thought about it when I said woman. What does woman mean?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you spell it differently. Like, what does
Mhm.
it mean? I don't feel like a she, her, but people see me as a woman. What does that mean? Like, it's
Right.
so complicated. I did want to adjust one thing that you said, because you said God's inside of us. And for those people that don't believe in God, just to say, because not everybody has that
Yeah.
association, right? So one of the ways that I like to think about it is that there's a source of power for all of creation. And that power, I just call it source. And people can call it God. They could call it Allah. They could call it a tree. They could call it the sun and moon.
Hmm.
Um, but there's some acknowledgement that there's a source of power that gives life to all of creation. And we have part of that inside of us.
Thank you for expounding on that. I can say one thing, and then the next time I would talk about it, I would say something else. So I really appreciate you saying that and kind of expanding that definition for us. I think that kind of takes us right into polarity, and talk a little bit about polarity, the work that you're doing now, and how that has like shifted.
Yes, I will. I just renamed Polarity Therapy Pathway for Living Liberation. So,
Ooh.
and that's the title for the book. And that is going to be done by the end of September.
Oh my gosh. Hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Let me tell you something. Okay. Suzanne is 70. We just had a beautiful celebration in Akron. Um, there were boats, there was singing, there was music, there was vegan food. Oh my God, it was amazing. And Suzanne, so I have 2 poetry books, and I'm a anthology contributor to one book. So I have 3 books circulating with my work in it and lots of published articles, all that kind of stuff. I have been begging Suzanne, and we all, anybody who does polarity work with Suzanne, like the story, wait till you about to hear it, but the story is so unbelievable in terms of who she studied with in relation to like the creator of polarity. And oh my God, she has that, like, oh my God, you haven't said a date.
Well, I got a new writing coach, and we have a date, and it's in process. It's going to be done. I have the
Big.
mission and the vision. I have the outline, and I'm starting to dump everything I've written into the um, outline so I can see what needs to get done. And I'm getting some more graphic images, and it's happening.
This book
It'll be
is
book
so
one.
important.
Book one. Book
This
one.
book is so important.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're doing this.
Thank you. Well, I think
Ah,
on my birthday card, you people got to write down wishes, and you said finish your book. I think that was you.
probably. It probably had a bunch of
Probably.
exclamation points and a
Yeah.
smiley face. And it's like, finish your book, right? Meow or something.
Yeah, I think you did that. It's true. No, it's happening for real. I'm on it. So
I'm so excited.
yeah.
Okay. Say more.
Okay.
I had to stop
All
and
right.
do that.
Well, I'm not sure. I think what I'd like to do is share how I got to polarity, because I think that's what's compelling, and how it's transformed over time. Um, I had a very traumatic childhood, and I really spent most of my life wanting to die and hating myself, but I also loved physics. And I heard about this thing called polarity therapy, and I was both skeptical and curious, but really what it is the design of energy for the human form. So there's an operating system for the human form that gives us a pathway of uh, living liberation, is what I will say. And, Dr. Stone was the founder of Polarity, and he was an interesting human in that he was a midwife, he was an osteopath, a naturopath. He studied Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, and he also was a very deep meditator. So he knew things inside. So it wasn't just didactic information. And it's not like he created this information, because there is too much ancient history and knowledge. But what he did was synthesize the information in a way that he was trying to have the medical world that was becoming more and more allopathic remember the lost art of energy. And so basically what polarity is it says that our soul consciousness is operating through form in order to remember itself. That's the operating system. Most people think of polarity as hands-on work. I'm going to go get a polarity treatment. But that's not really what polarity is. That's to support this operating system that our soul consciousness in the human form is operating through it to help us remember. And how do we do that? That's the question. So in the ideal pattern, the soul sends through form in order to remember, and that's a circle, and it's an automatic return. But we have this thing called the mind. The mind is meant to be neutral, but the mind, you know, we get born and we start seeing the world and we start losing touch with that etheric, primal, pulsing energy inside of us, and we get stuck in the world of form. And when we're stuck in the world of form, we get fixated both on who we are because of form, not who we are on the inside.
Yeah.
Do we have to hustle and prove? Whatever, you know, and if you bring race into it, then you have to prove 5 times as hard or 100 times as hard, and you don't get to rest. So you don't get to know that living energy inside you because you're too busy surviving and hustling and grinding, right? So the path of polarity is returning the soul to the positive pull instead of the mind thinking it's the positive pull, willing agendas, operating from biases, creating interpretations from hurtful experiences, and then believing they're the truth about you. I'm a piece of shit because this person hurt me when I was 5. So, and then keeping that piece of shit, excuse my language, I hope it's okay, I guess here, but
Oh yeah, please.
keep that piece of shit forefront in everything you do and see about yourself, right? And so, but that experience is over, but the mind is stuck in that groove. So polarity is about taking the time to slow down and get still inside and use the forefront part of your brain that can observe, discern, instead of just the back part of your brain just reacts and acts on reaction and isn't discerning and observing and choosing. So I think polarity leads us to observing, learning, and discerning, and then also it invites us to become stewards of that life energy inside of us and to serve it and let it inform us instead of serving the world or serving the shit in our head, right? So we have another way to place our attention. And I think, so what polarity did for me when I was like, oh, there's a living energy inside of me, I can't deny that. It took me years of practicing, but eventually I didn't, you know, hate myself or want to die anymore. But it's a slow path. It's not like this immediate, you know, fix or something like that. It requires dedicated practice. Then I think what I got fascinated about, which is not in Dr. Stone's work, is this whole thing about collective power, and that by tuning into that living energy is in everyone and everything. And if we can tune into it, we wake up to the fact, I mean, it's not a cognitive idea, but we actually experience that we're interconnected and interdependent. When I think about white supremacy and systemic racism, what does that do? It, first of all, hierarchies humans that isn't real, number one. It says some people have more value and less value, and that's not true by the source of life. That's not true. And then it also creates divisiveness instead of unity. So one of the things that seemed really vital is that we had to build social fabric that reflected the true nature of life itself, is that we're interdependent and interconnected, and we're only as healthy as each living being is vibrant and radiant. So in our trainings, this this training is very exciting, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But I've worked to have my rooms at least 50% racially diverse. And this time we've topped that. So we're in a different, we can talk about the language around that, because I think it's
Yeah.
fascinating what you brought up. But to see, I'm going to say Black people or people of melanin tones in the room fall asleep the first day with white people in the room because of the field we're creating. We say that life is at the center of everything and it can hold difference without sanitizing oppression. So to build rooms where there's a living safety, I can't promise interpersonal safety, but I can promise living safety. To see people fall asleep the first day is just always something to me. And that when we stand there and every life is included, truly included, whether it's whatever the diversity dimensions are, every life, we're only as healthy as the vibrancy of each life. And the only other thing I want to say is Polarity redefines health. It doesn't say health is about the body. Because you can see a lot of people that are physically, robust and they're dull. They are not aware of interconnectedness. They're not aware of what hurts you hurts me, what hurts me hurts you. There isn't that living sensitivity. So what Dr. Stone says is that health is tuning into that one river of life energy, or your soul currency, or whatever you want to call it. That's what health is. So that you're tuning into your own radiance and radiating. And that vibrancy is there, whether you're sick physically or, none of those things are what it is. It's, are you radiating from the essential nature of your being and the truth of who you are? And for me, it's the best action of social justice that I can find, is that we're creating fields where your livingness matters and you get to experience your vibrancy in a room with people that don't look like you and don't have the same diversity dimensions in you. We become a forest where we're signaling thread and we're awakening and supporting everyone being the best living self they can be. So that is why it is now called Pathway to Living Liberation, because it's living liberation personally and collectively. And for me, with all the work we've done, it's the best way, I think, to interrupt white supremacy and systemic racism. I haven't experienced a living thing with that kind of complexity in the room. I'm not saying there aren't other things, but what do you want to say about what I just said? Because
I'm always like, oh man, like, yeah, keep talking. I think one of the things that I will say about Polarity is I just completed my second cycle of 3 weekends of 4 days, right? So when we talk about this being a slow process, my first Polarity training was in 2019. And I feel like the minute you sign up, like the work starts happening, right? So I signed up in 2018, and it's like, as soon as you accept the invitation, like stuff starts to happen internally. And then I went through the first one and I was like, oh, this is life-changing. Like, I recognized it as such. I understood that I wanted to be involved with it. I didn't know what that meant or how to create a practice. And as someone with like autism and ADHD, like that's a late in life diagnosis, I went to a second one in 2022, a second round. And that was when I was kind of like, oh, like this is like, I almost had the same feeling that I had when I was in church. And not that it was the church folks saying what God was, but my felt sense of God there. And obviously throughout the course of my life, having multiple intersections and navigating what that looked like and balancing what faith and spirituality and religion look like. I'm trained in Reiki. I have shamanic training level 2. Like, I've explored all of those. And even at the evangelical school I went to in high school, we had projects where we would go look at other religions. And I've always been curious about that. And for me, Polarity was like, it doesn't sanitize oppression, right? And
Right.
it looks at the life force inside all of us. And for me, that was one of those things where I was like, how long has it been since I've connected? Because I didn't really grasp everything. I tried to let it wash over me. I'm a note taker. And that may be why I don't know. That may be the ADHD. I don't know. But I'm a big note taker and I'm a big student. And when I was in there and I had to put my pen down and feel, I was at that moment aware of how long it had been since I had truly felt connected to the livingness and like the radiance inside of me.
Mm.
And it changes things. Like it's a game changer. And I think one of the reasons that some of those numbers have flipped is because uh, me as a Black, queer, gender fluid person, woman presenting, all of those, identities and intersections. When you come in that space, I will tell other Black folks like about this. Like I joke around about being like a polarity evangelist. Um, but I think that it is, and we had one person who's an organizer that was in our last class,
Mhm.
and they said, "Oh, this is the answer when we're in all those community conversations." And someone's like, "Well, what's the answer? Like, what's healing? What does it look like?" Now, it's not an easy answer. It's a
Mhm.
long-term answer, right? It's a dedicated pathway. Um, but for people that will choose in, it is like a way that you can regulate yourself and a way that you can care for yourself
Mm.
and come back to your remembering, come back to your internal wisdom, and then
Mm.
also come back to a collective supportive system that also has the same
Mm.
awareness of their own livingness. And that's so important. Like it creates this culture of like, we're doing our work, we're going to do our work, and then when we come here together, like I don't even know what some of the people in our class did,
Right.
like profession wise, personality wise, in the world. I'm not sure if I would have gotten along or enjoyed every single person that was in the class. But what
Right.
I do know is that I felt their livingness,
Mhm.
and that was something I loved and enjoyed about each and every one of them, regardless of what they were coming with, regardless of what they, um, how they responded, like the care and the intention that is created in that space in the field, and like the collective power that is created in that space, because people are informed walking in, they're making an informed decision to like stand for their own life. And when we're doing that, it's like, actually, I care about you and I know we're all interconnected, but I'm coming here for me.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna take care of me and you take care of you, and look at how we
Right.
all take care of each other. And that is like the biggest thing, because in the world, I'll just do it, right? A lot of times, I talk about the
Mm.
lone wolf, like, you know what? I have really high expectations and standards. Fuck it, I'll do it. Like that becomes the thing, like where I'm like, you know what? Never mind. I don't need your support. Um, and we learned to like believe in that myth of individualization that white supremacy has taught
Right.
us and socialized us into. And in polarity, that can't live there.
No,
Like that's
no.
where that individualization goes to die. But at the same time, I have to walk in with a focus of me. It's almost counterintuitive because of what we've been socialized
Right.
into. I just wish more people could experience it. I love that you're 70 and alive and thriving. And I'm like, we need 50 more years of Suzanne teaching this.
You're finding your own way of carrying it out in the world. What I love is how it gets internalized, and those that feel passionate about it incorporate it into everything they do. And the living the thing that I love about polarity is the living magnetism,
Yeah.
right? So the more deep you go into your own radiance, you're magnetically informing whoever you're around, but you're not having to give. You
Yeah.
don't have to give of yourself. And I think that I love what you said. I wrote it down. I love their livingness. Like we don't, I don't know what everybody does in the room either still to this day. I don't know if I'd want to hang out with anybody. And the primary commitment you have, you're the steward of your own life energy, your own soul. So you have to be accountable inside yourself. And that's what helps you build the field, not by giving of yourself to other people or helping other people. Or it's not that. You have to stay in here. And the deeper in you go to your own power and your own radiance, that's how you become of service.
Yeah. I
Right? It's
was,
like it going.
ooh, no, I was just gonna say, I was talking to La. I was on La's podcast, La Baker. It will have come out already. So if you are listening, please go check out Everything's Not Black and White with La and Brian Baker. But like, I talked about my North Star and my yes being like centering the dignity of every human life, right? And then connecting with my radiance. And those two things, if I can't do those two things in the moment, then I have to step back and reground or reconnect.
Mm.
And like, I mean, am I rooting? I'm gonna say this, and I'll say this out loud, and it'll probably be a soundbite, but I'm rooting for all Black people. I'm absolutely rooting for all of us. In that space, if I'm connected to my livingness and I'm asked to connect with my own radiance, then if I'm that connected with myself, I actually am not looking out and saying, oh, is my radiance connecting with a Black person? It's like, is my radiance connecting with life? And so when I say center the dignity of every human, I really mean that. And that requires a lot of accountability on myself,
Right.
because I can't just say, oh, this is a white person, so I have righteous rage about the way them and their ancestors have created America or whatever. And now I'm just going to be dehumanizing to you. Like I can't do that. Like I can't do that in integrity with what my soul is asking for in this iteration of my consciousness. Like I can't do that. And if I'm honest with myself and I can't do that, and I find myself in a space where I might be doing that, then I have to hold myself accountable to that. Like if I'm out here just misgendering people, if I'm out here not listening and being like, you don't know what you're talking about, or on the petty train all the time and like calling people names or calling people Karens, which is interesting because my name is Karen. But like if I'm just out here and I'm just moving off my rage and I'm not connected to the radiance inside of me, the radiance inside of me wants something different. The life inside of me, capital L life, wants something different. And I think that's possible when we connect in that space. And I don't see that. I don't see that in the world often because we're so reactive and in our adaptive strategies, and we're trying to survive. And it's getting what I would say as a society worse, right? But I also think that it's requiring us to be creative and intentional about the ways that we heal too. And so I'm very intentional about polarity and the ways that I stay connected to it, because as soon as I go back out in the world from like a polarity space, form is there waiting. The world is there waiting for me to ask for its approval, and for me to fall into the societal norms, the binaries, all of that stuff. It's still right there. It's at the door,
Right.
waiting for me to join it. Like the haze of assimilation and whiteness, like all of that is there, ready for me to partake. Social media, like to go into those conversations where we can't connect, right? And all we're doing is just arguing our points on social media and calling each other names and calling each other out of our names. Like that is right outside the door of a polarity training. So it's still going to require me to come tomorrow and connect with the life inside of me by choice, and not give in and connect with the world. Like it every day, that's a choice I have to sit with and make sure I connect with in spaces where I'm like, ooh, this is It's a lot of whiteness. Or if I can see things, you said I can see and I can hear. If I can see, hear, and feel all these things, I still have to find a way to choose
Yeah.
in to connecting to the radiance inside of me. That is a daily choice, multiple times a day. So, I mean, I love that it's being called Dedicated Path to Lifelong Liberation. Did I get it right?
Living liberation.
Living liberation. Yeah.
Living
Because
liberation, right?
yeah, it's like real, because it's a constant choice. In the last one, you and Anne were talking about how life is a series of um reaction and adaptation, and like basically like dysregulation and regulation. That's how I heard it. I know those weren't the words, but it was like a series of dysregulation and regulation, activation, regulation, right? And we're going through this constantly, especially in the world the way it's set up now. And every time that I choose the higher form of consciousness, or what I would say my favorite self, every time I choose that person, and that could be going to the gym, that could be uh, not using substances, that could be taking a nap when I may need to do work, but I also need to restore and I can come back to it. That may be talking to someone with dignity and holding my dignity and their dignity at the center. All of those are choices that I have to make multiple times a day. And so that's how I like incorporate it here. Or like, what's showing up here? Like, I'll ask some of my employees sometimes, like, there seems to be some tension here. What's going on? Because generally, it's not even about me. It's like, what's going on within you that you can't show up in this way that we're all committing or agreeing to show up in. And then it's like, boom, this is what's really happening. And we have to like take time. That's the thing that polarity has taught me, is to take time. Take time with whatever's going on and sit with it, acknowledge it, move through it, and then we can move on. But we're like not helping ourselves by trying to act like stuff is not going on inside of us. It's always like there's so much happening in our systems.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that you said that what I really appreciate is your North Star is, your own radiance, connecting more deeply with your own radiance. And also by doing that, it awakens in any of us the holding everyone's dignity. Like that's inherent within the radiance. Like if we're going to, and then you ask yourself to become accountable. And if you don't have that North Star, you don't have something to return to when you're off. So I appreciate getting that North Star clear. I also, when I was listening to everything you were saying, I was thinking about the other laws of polarity, attraction, and repulsion. Like you can repel things that aren't life-giving to you. You don't have to, so if there's too much white supremacy in the field and you want to hold the dignity, it doesn't mean you don't repel. Like you can still repel. So I think that we in the training build skills around how do you set a boundary, or we build skills so that you can function within your North Star in a way that takes care of you and doesn't have you endure things that aren't healthy for you to endure. So it's not like in holding the dignity, then you're going to go endure things you shouldn't endure. You're just going to, or you'll learn how to phase that out over time. But it's like, it gets complex and it's an ongoing learning process. We don't ever grow out of this learning process, but we need something to orient to. Can I go back to something about diversity, because I want to go into the conversation. So
this is your show. You can do whatever you want to do.
Well, it's just interesting because this time we have 70 humans of melanin tone. So
70%?
70%. So what is how do we, because I said, oh, we have 70% racial diversity this time. And you went, no. Do you remember what you said?
Yeah. Okay.
So can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's exciting.
Okay. So, and I wrote this, maybe I'll tweet it out today. But it was like, here's my thought, and then I'll bring it back to that. My thought is a room of all Black people is not racially diverse. It may be equitable, it may be an affinity and safe space. Why? Because the disparity of white dominant spaces has been our lived experience and socialization, right? So we may need those spaces. It may be equitable, but it is not racially diverse. And so as we get intentional around our language, I think it's important because because Suzanne was like, we have 70%, and we've talked about what the field and how the field changes when there's 50% racial diversity. And we mean racial diversity in a non-white sense, like
Mhm.
people that
Right.
like are non-white. And we're so used to these spaces, even though the global majority is not white, right? But when we're looking at that and we're thinking about that, I'm like, how is the language shifting? And I think some of the thing that challenges me around language is that, like, I can say, oh, in this moment, I'm connected to your life, right? Now I can see that you're white, so I'm not colorblind in that sense. But in our work, I am seeing your livingness. I'm not connecting with your whiteness or your womanhood appearance. I'm connecting with your life. And so when I think about that, it's just like, how does the language shift? Because
Right.
the truth is, like, now you can even go to, we have a minimum expectation because you don't run the course if it's not 50% racially diverse.
Right.
So it could be, the language could be changed and it may have to be wordier, but it's like, okay, now we don't have, um, we will not move this session forward unless we have 50% racial diversity. And we encourage and celebrate the presence of racial diversity, of people of this. And what does that mean? Because honestly, the field, um, when you think about Black woman leadership, there haven't been a ton of spaces where Black people have been able to lead, and Black women especially. And I
Mm.
think sometimes with, like, when we're looking at the patriarchy, if there's male Blackness in the space, like, it can also just dominate. James Baldwin talks about, um, that Black men just want to be included in the power conversation and have access to the same power. So then when that leadership happens, sometimes um, there will just be the same thing.
Mhm.
Like, it perpetuates the same thing, and that's not exclusive. That's just to say that sometimes that happens, that Black people will get in leadership, and if they're not connected to their own integrity, or if they're just chasing power, then the same thing will happen with them in leadership, as
Yes.
it's always happened. There will be dominance, there will be hierarchy, and that can mean a lot of different things for the people that are underneath them, right? Because now finally I have power and I'm going to turn into what oppressed me. That happens a lot. We've seen that in tales and stories of enslavement, around overseers being Black men.
Mhm.
Like, so white men could essentially leave all of their enslaved people there to work and have a Black person, a Black man overseeing, and nothing would change. Like, the same things would happen. And so when I think we're talking about, race in the space, and like Black woman leadership in a world where uh not good people, but intentional, collectively empowered people are leading, stuff changes.
Yes.
Like, I have the Ohio Rest Collective, and I am so grateful. We're doing something with Zora's House, and this weekend. So by the time you hear this, this will have happened. But, like, it's a film about a Black woman who is queer and has a child and went from foster care to a nursing PhD, right? And it's all Black leadership in the organizations that we're working with: Kaleidoscope, Zora's House, Sky Now Consulting with Jennifer Walton, Maroon Arts Group, and it's all these Black folks, Letha Pugh, like with Blackout and Proud. Like, there's all these Black folks that are coming together, and it's just this tender space. And these are all Black folks that are doing their work. I know it for sure. I'm in community with them. And when you have that, And it's like,
Mhm.
it's just things are done right. Like, I don't even know. I know we don't talk in like right or wrong, but like there's a right way. It's a felt sense of a right way to do things. It's a right way to treat people. It's a right way to be in integrity. It's accountable. There's trust. There's communication. There's like, if I say we're all gonna go do these things, people go and they do it and then come back. And I want people to know what it looks like when the right folks combine, and the chemistry and the culture that is created is just one of integrity and like compassion and community and like
Mhm.
goodness. Like there's a goodness there that calls us back into like, oh, this is possible. Like with community, if we're all in this space. And I think there's so much possible when Black leadership is in the space, and that is something that is harder to attain with white folks because of the a lack of willingness or readiness to shed
Mhm.
those layers
Yeah.
of that supremacy that has been taught. When you do find folks, because like when I think about your Polarity team, I'm like, wow, like that's so powerful. And it's racially diverse, it's gender diverse,
Yeah.
and like it's really
Queer,
powerful. Yeah, super queer.
super
And like,
queer. Yeah.
yeah, super queer. And so it's like, what does this look like when we start to dismantle the binaries and the societal norms that we've been socialized into? And so I think there's layers and nuance to it, and each thing can be situational. Um, but like historically, the thing about power and the reason why you can't just put racism here and not put capitalism and patriarchy,
Mhm.
you can't have them without each other,
No.
you know. And capitalism asks that there always is a working class, or that there's always a subordinate, or there's always a supreme and a, you know, lesser than, like that these systems call for that.
Mhm.
Like we saw it with Tyree Nichols. You know, we saw it with 5 Black police officers. And I think the hardest thing is when there's racial illiteracy, um, to have
Yes.
these conversations. And I'm glad we can have these conversations. And there are some people that it's just gonna, you know, it's gonna go over, and that's okay. But the people that understand what we're talking about, um, and that's not a knock or a shaming thing or a
Mm.
guilt thing. It's just like the people that understand what we're talking about, I guarantee you look at their lives and there are rich lived experiences there.
Yes.
Because just like nature, diversity enriches a space. It
Yes.
doesn't deplete it.
No.
These are beautiful things to think about. And um you've been, I do want to highlight this because I'm really proud of knowing you and your discipline. So you are an avid meditator. We are
Yeah.
doing this in the morning because I feel I'm most connected to myself and my radiance in the morning before I hit the world, before I hit form.
Yeah.
Um, and I know you meditated for probably 3 hours this morning, or
Two and
more.
a half. No.
2.5. You're
2.5.
like, oh, you caught me on the day. I got 2.5 in. But every day you're doing that, and you are vegetarian, vegan now,
uh, Vegan, vegetarian. I mean, I don't eat eggs.
freegan.
Yeah,
Okay,
vegan.
freegan, whatever your body tells you, but definitely vegan, vegetarian, and you do not drink or do any substances. I commend you for that. I'm not there yet, but I'm close. I'm close. Um,
Better than before?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, my relationship with alcohol has completely shifted in the last 2 years. And with the pandemic, it's like you can go one way or the other. You can go everyday wine, or you can go um in a different direction. And I have gone in a direction of and I think at times work has saved me, because there have been times when I felt like apathy. Not that I wanted to harm myself, but I've definitely felt like apathy about whether I would want to wake up or not.
Yeah.
And I know that with polarity, like when I think about polarity, I'm tearing up a little bit, but like when I think about polarity and like connecting to that life inside of me, I had not felt that because around 2000, like a couple years before I went to polarity, like everybody just started dying on me.
Yeah.
And I was like, ugh, like my favorite people were leaving. And I was like, man, what does this mean? Like, what am I going to do? And I feel like I had a choice. I had a choice whether to, and I did for a while, like I numbed with alcohol because I would have that brief euphoria and then I could sleep, maybe even for 4 or 6 hours, because like I was so numb, you know? And sometimes even when I would drink, I would feel. And it was, yeah, like one drink a day or like after work or being by myself and isolating, like that's not the formula for like connecting with your life and wanting to be here more. It's a depressant. So, it's shifted in the last 2 years where, um, and it was interesting because like with dry January, we were trying that. And then I went to a funeral and my cousin had requested all of us have a shot of bourbon. And I was like, I'm gonna do that for my cousin. You know what I'm saying? Like we're all doing this as a family. I haven't seen a lot of these people. I was like, okay, I'll do that. But like socially, I don't drink. I think it makes us act really wild. And I and sometimes I would in the past like drink to be in community because that's where I was or how I was showing up. But I don't hang out in the same spaces. I Some people might not find me as fun because I'm so committed to like that growth and development. And like I almost can't even have surface conversations anymore. So like I'm in the bar and like then somebody's all of a sudden telling me all about their whole life, because I'm not drinking. So it's like it's an interesting relationship with this, but you don't drink. You had one sip, I don't know, like 50 years ago.
I think the last time was when I was 24.
Okay.
So how long is that? 46 years ago.
Hmm. Yeah. And um we keep coming back to like what does that choice look like? And I say it's like relationship, right? Like what is the relationship with it? Like is the relationship with your body um to ask for what it needs? Because it's probably not going to tell you alcohol. It's probably not going to tell you substances. If you're actually listening to what it wants. It wants nourishment and love and being clear. Like, can you talk to how being clear has supported you in your work?
Um, well, I think, I was really athletic at the time and eating really healthy. And I had 2 beers with pizza and I woke up the next day groggy.
Mm,
And at that time, I was also still like wanting to die and hating myself and the amount of energy it took to overcome the grogginess. I was like fighting for my life. And so it felt like it was extra work. So I want to say that like
mm,
now I have to use this energy to do that, so I just stopped. I think for me that what it's done is that, it's trusting that this life energy has everything I need. Like, why would I dull it? Why would I dissipate it? Why would I distract myself from it? I think that's the bigger question for me. And then um, I'm not having to use my energy to recover. And the clarity, I mean, we all have stuff that comes up inside of us that we have to wrestle with. And if I'm using that energy to try to recover from a substance and I don't have as much energy to use to recover for the things that's going to help me go deeper inside me, like it's not going to bring me what I'm really longing for. We're all, whether we can feel it or know it or not, we're all longing to return to the truth of who we are.
mm.
Now, we might not have that itch yet that this world isn't our oyster, but someday, somewhere, we'll get that itch where there's something more and we deserve it. I think we all deserve to have contact and know the radiance of our own soul current inside of us. Why not? I mean,
Yeah.
we have to leave this body anyway. So how do you want to use your attention while you're here? Like, I'd rather use it to invest in that current inside of me, because that's what I'm going with when I leave. It's like you're building your own bank
Yeah.
account in a certain kind of way. But when your soul leaves your body, that's called death. So if I'm tuning into that current as my health, I'm also investing in my dying bank account, like
Yeah. The higher consciousness bank account.
like, and so that I can, and it's the greatest gift we have. Our heart can't beat without it. Why are we not attending to that gift inside and serving it? Like we
Yeah.
can't exist without it. So what are we attending to? Like I don't want to miss my own livingness. Like, why? Like, even when I'm working, I keep part of my attention with my radiance, because this moment's going to pass, but where am I?
Hmm.
You know?
I love that call. And to me, that's a higher call because, of course, with nuance, it's a journey to my relationship with substances. And I think the cannabis conversation is a little more nuanced and a little more tricky
Yeah.
because, I have what has been, diagnosed as like complex PTSD around racial trauma,
Right.
gender stuff, and so, but I also am in choice with when I imbibe anything, right? And that could even be around food, and like that relationship has shifted in the last few years as well. And I had a coach that you talked to around wellness as well. But I think the thing that polarity gives us is like choice. So if I'm going to choose this, I'm going to make a choice about it. And I think that's
Right.
really, really important to be able to make that choice about what I'm about to do, knowing that it's going to take a certain amount of energy to recover. And like, I ask myself probably a series of questions before I do any substance, because I don't want something that is kind of latent that hasn't been dealt with to show up. And then you're doing not only recovery physically, you're doing recovery emotionally, because maybe you said something that you didn't want to say, or you showed up how you didn't want to show up. And so I think it's a combination of like creating safe spaces to imbibe in a celebratory way if that's what people want, not shaming
Yes.
folks. Like it's like all of these things. And like
Yeah.
how do we understand where people are at and like connect with them and meet them there? Some people I can't be around if they're drinking. You know what I mean? Like there's all these nuances and things, but like ultimately the choice comes down to, how do I want to show up? What am
Hmm.
I willing to, like, what am I repelling? What am I attracting? And am I not dealing with anything to use this in a moment? And so it's like harm
Yeah.
reduction, you know?
Right. No, I don't think there is any right or wrong, or you should do this and you shouldn't do that. I
Yeah.
don't believe in that. I believe that, like, but make conscious choices. It's like,
Yeah.
it's even like when we're talking about adaptive strategies, what has your psychobiology done to keep you safe? And like, once you understand it, or once I understand, I don't want it to lead me, but I might want to use it.
Yeah.
So it's like, right. So everything is just like staying awake to choose, because then you know what you're
Yes.
being accountable for. Sometimes if the I'm a piece of shit comes up, I want to indulge in it for a little bit, but instead of just doing it unconsciously, I'm gonna go like, just feeling like a piece of shit for a while, like, and not pretending like I don't want to do that. And so is that great to feel like a piece of shit? No, but I want to do it in this moment. And so
I
it's
want to
just like,
wallow a little
yeah,
bit.
I want to like hate myself for a minute here. So it's more like, I'm going to go hate myself right now, rather than hating myself is unconscious. And I'm just,
Living that way.
living that way. And we're never going to do anything perfectly. We're never going to be, like, that's part of is accepting imperfection. And we just want to keep growing. It's not like we have to get it perfect. I just chose to not drink. I think that I've needed that, or I don't
Mhm.
think I would be here today because I just had so
Yeah.
much trauma inside of me. I couldn't, I mean, just to even like feel like my life was worth living took like till I was 40 something, like in a real
Wow.
kind of way, not just oh, not just what are those things when you um not it wasn't an affirmation, you know what I mean? To
Yeah.
actually get there where I had enough transitioning from my trauma to a living system. It doesn't happen overnight, and it requires a lot of dedication of like, because this was so heavy over here, the trauma and
Mhm.
it was so heavy that like it just took a long, long time. And I think in this age of fast pace and stuff like that, and immediate results, polarity is not like that. I appreciate when you said you have to slow down. Polarity is slow. It's slow
Yeah.
and steady, and it's, the drag of the old habits, they take a long time. And but it's worth it because it's actually sustainable. It's not a quick fix, but it's something that you mature in. I mean, I think not having done a training for 2 or 3 years, when you came back in, you could see
Yeah.
like, and you can see now where it's going to take you now, like, and you're not going to be done with it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Hi, kitty.
My cat's here
Yeah.
and she wants to say hi. So we let her do what she wants because it's a big chair. Um, I
Mhm.
love that. And I love the notion that everybody's journey is going to look different. And there's no prize and the points don't matter, but like it literally just goes into your higher consciousness bank. And so there's no metrics, there's no
No,
reporting,
no.
there's no like, oh, I got an A in polarity. It's like
Yeah.
am I living? Am I more connected to my livingness? I'm choosing between dulling, and staying in dysregulation or wallowing or whatever I'm doing, but I'm making an empowered choice. And I think that's just like the most brilliant thing about polarity
Hmm.
that we can do is just keep returning to the fact that we have permission to make an empowered choice.
Yes, agency, right?
Mhm. All right. So this has been deep, deep, deep conversation. And I really appreciate that there's, even though you're hearing, what's going on, there's a lot going on inside each of us and
Yeah.
probably inside of you as you listen. But now we're going to turn it to the situational hot seat. So I
Yeah.
have asked Suzanne to bring a scenario that I don't know, which is we talk almost every day or every other day. So we are they're gonna give me a situation and I'm going to listen and tell what I would have done. And then they are going to talk about what they did and um maybe some of the first reaction stuff and maybe how they would have done it differently. Um and and then we'll just see how it wants to end. Maybe we'll do collective power, um, so people can experience that if they want to stay on for a final, maybe meditative type practice. But tell me your situation. Let's walk through it.
Okay. I was in a training that was primarily Black identified social justice activists, and there were just a few white people in the room. And we were doing a practice um, and I was working with a queer Black woman that I had connected with. And it was a practice where you actually activate a response, and they called time out, and I was activated, and I hadn't had a chance to recover. And so I'm so used to what we do here, where we have people at our backs, and, you know,
Hmm.
so I said out loud without keeping historical context, I'm white, queer Black woman. I said, I imagined you at my back. So um, I didn't catch it at all. The next day, I, this was probably, I don't know, 10 years ago. I went to the teaching team, and I go, I don't really know how white supremacy lives inside of me in my body. I don't really know. And or ways that I don't know that it is. And they just said to me, well, we have to talk to you because of what happened. That person is, doesn't want you talking to them and doesn't want you um, interacting with them until you understand what you did. But I didn't understand what I did because I was in my own intention of how I understand things, and I wasn't understanding the impact, but I also wasn't given information about what that impact was. So um, um, that's a scenario. So I'm not going to tell you what I did or didn't do.
So you created some tension, and as you understand it, the comment about them being at your back
right,
was
historically putting a queer Black woman at my back is just crap, but I wasn't
like, how
thinking
dare
of,
you, right?
right, I'm going to be behind. I didn't have that historical context, and that's all.
Hmm. So
And
you were thinking about it in the polarity sense of like, I was imagining you at my back, and that made me feel safe enough to regulate.
yep.
Okay. What
And all
would I
she
have done?
experienced was the racial dynamic of what I
Yeah.
asked of her to be at my back, which is crappy, right? From that, right?
It's interesting because when I think about like power dynamics, like the only person that I could imagine, or the only type of folks that I could imagine that would be like less intersectional or less oppressed in that sense, that would make me, that would trigger that. I think it would be similar to me asking a Black trans woman to be at my back, right? Or somebody that was like cis trans, like not cis trans, but like uh binary trans. So like woman or
Mm,
man trans, right? Or like a Black trans man, because I'm gender fluid and gender nonconforming. So there's some identity politics that are in there. But say who's someone like on this imaginary chart that we have of most oppressed to least oppressed intersections and identities. Um, if I said that or said something that uh, really challenged someone, I think the thing about repair is that, first of all, I have to want to acknowledge my harm, right? So whether or not that was my intent, whether or
right.
not that was what I was going for, or what I meant, I have to acknowledge the harm, right? And so they obviously have said something to your teaching team, um, and you have to send some messages, and you have to say, in that moment, I absolutely didn't understand that. I see how harmful that was. And if that person is willing to have a discussion with me after I do a little bit of work and find out just about the magnitude of how harmful that was, then I would love to come back and have a conversation with them. I completely understand why they don't want to talk to me right now. That is my grounded reaction. My initial reaction would be like, I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. Like that was a harmless comment, right? Like my initial reaction is going to be in defense of my goodness.
Right, right, right.
You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so I think I would be like, oh yeah, like, dang, let me go talk to them. Let me make it up. Meanwhile, they're setting a clear boundary by sending someone else to tell you they don't want to talk to you right now.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think slowing down a little bit gives me the chance to say, all right, like I've created some harm, repair, give them an offer or something of repair. Like I'm gonna go do some work and lean into specific situations when things have been done maybe on the backs of Black women, or
Right.
like those kinds of things. And then I'm going to sit with that for a minute without requiring any emotional obligations from you of labor. And then when I've processed the harm and I've sat with what it could possibly feel like, because you can't quite empathize there, but you can
Right.
definitely sympathize. I'm going to sit with that, and then I'm going to come back to talk about it when I'm ready. I hope you can still be in this class. I hope you can still be in this space, knowing that, and there may be some public acknowledgement that gets to happen too, right? Like we don't
Mhm.
publicly acknowledge things because we're so
Right.
afraid of transparency. And I mean, you would have to get their permission to speak on it. They may want to be like, because a lot of times stuff happens so often to me. If every single time harm happened to me as a Black woman, Black queer woman presenting person, woman with a Y, trans person, non-binary, however I was categorized in that way. If every time somebody publicly acknowledged that there was harm, that would be exhausting for me. So you may go to that person and you may want to absolve. Like the thing about that is we want absolution. We want not only to express our sorry, we also want to be forgiven in that moment for it. Like we want to be told
Right.
that it's
Right. Right.
okay
Right. Right.
from the person we just harmed. We want to
Right.
be told like it's okay. You're good. Don't worry about it. And the thing about that is, when you have centered accountability, that means I'm going to take accountability for my stuff. I'm going to go deal with it, unpack it, utilize the resources. I might even have to pay somebody. I might have to pay my therapist. I might have to pay
Right.
my mentor. I might have to pay a healer or a teacher of some sort. I may have to go to one of my friends that I'm in right relationship with. Maybe in that sense, if we knew each other, then you would have called me and been like, I just need you to hold space here. And if you don't have the capacity to do that, that's okay.
Right. Right. Right.
You might send me, you might be like, here's $50 and go get some dinner. I appreciate you taking the time today to hold space. Like you have to create that support system for
Right.
yourself to process that without asking the other person to process it with you or absolve you,
Yep.
and it's like when you think about all the steps that it takes, you have to slow down because if I'm going based off of my activation, if I'm going based off my need to be absolved and people please and be okay and externally praised or validated, then I'm just gonna probably fumble through all of that.
Yeah.
If I can slow down and be intentional and get really clear on whose responsibility is what, it's my responsibility. I've created the harm. It's my responsibility to give them space and time to figure out what they need. Because there's not a Black person that I know right now that doesn't have a support system for when these harms occur because of how often they occur.
Right.
So let me go be with my people. Let me go handle my own without worrying about handling you.
Yep.
And so like being okay with that and like being okay with someone's disappointment, pain, and not feeling like you were responsible for the harm, but like not feeling responsible for fixing it. Like that gets us in trouble. We want to fix
Yeah.
it. And there's no, like, think about a fracture or think about a broken bone. Like, you can't just fix that back in one day. Now, what happened in an instant, but it takes weeks, months, sometimes even years, sometimes surgeries. Like, it takes physical therapy. Like, it takes a lot to heal those. And I think when you have emotional or spiritual fractures, like, they take time
Mhm.
and we can't just dive right in and try to fix it in that moment. That's where more harm occurs, if you ask me. And so um that would be restful transformative justice, because those things are like acknowledge the harm, disrupt and interrupt any further harm, and you know address the conditions that allowed harm to occur, and then provide an offering. And it's up to that other person to take that offering or not. Like that's the principles of transformative justice by
Right.
Generation 5, right? And Aaron adapted that for organizational development.
Yeah.
But like it takes time. And there after a while, like there's so much harm. Like if you look at organizations, there's so much harm. Like how do we take that organizational harm and take time to create the reparative processes? But the problem is that there's so much harm. So people don't see enough progress.
Right.
But it takes so many people to engage in that repair process. And some people choose out. And I get it. I understand it's a lot of work. And I have to say, if I'm in right relationship with you, and I say that means that I'm committed to repair, regardless of who creates the harm or what happens, I'm committed to repair. That means that I'm committed to effort, labor, time, attention, and energy, working through stuff with you.
Mhm.
And obviously we don't jump into those relationships with everyone,
Right.
but I pretty much only I repel people that aren't committed to repair or aren't committed to centering the dignity of every human life
Mhm.
without sanitizing oppression, right? In pursuit of liberation.
Mhm.
And that's a lot to guide you and to always come back to.
Yeah.
So that's a tough conversation, because that means you have to be centered, grounded, intentional, careful even. Um that's tough. Are y'all okay? I
Me?
have to know, yeah, with that person.
I
What
don't, I mean,
happened?
well, so, you know, I didn't have the formal education around intention and an impact back then. But I understood, I appreciate the way you're talking about it, because I never thought about they went to the teaching team and the teaching team you know, I went to them, but they brought it to me. I think that, like, what I did was I sat with what's the cost of not keeping historical context and how that can produce harm. And I also had to sit with, you know, I went into shame, of course, you know, and then
Mhm.
um, worked through that and go, this is such a teachable moment for me. And um, I didn't, I think we had 3 more days of the training, and I did not interact with her during that training because I felt like I hadn't sat with it long enough to
Mhm.
understand the gravity of it, because it threw me off. I hadn't ever had that happen before, in terms of not the power of not keeping historical context.
Mhm.
Um, so the next session, which was like 3 months later, I waited until I felt um, like that I wasn't in a place where I wanted absolution, or it took a lot of work to get, like, I didn't want any pat on the back or anything like that. So I did go up to her and I said, are you available for a conversation? Because I didn't want to assume. And she said, not right now. And then she said, later I am. I said, I'm really sorry for any way that I might have, that I hurt you, is what I said. Sorry
Mhm.
for any way that I hurt you. And she said, you just pissed me off. And I said, well, do you need anything? And she said, not right now. So I left it at that. But what I didn't do was think about making a public apology, or thinking about, could I have done something like that? And could I have gone back to her? We really only interacted 2 other times in the training. It was a year-long training, but one time we had these pads you hold and people hit them really hard.
Mhm.
We ended up paired together, where, so I held the pads and she was looking right at my eyes, and she went at it, and I just held her dignity, just like you said. I
Mhm.
held her dignity. I didn't do that with her, but she did it with me, and there was something healing in that. I believe that I could take the hits, you
Mhm.
know, and stand there. And then the very last day of the training, we were doing something, and one of her friends came to partner with me. She went and looked at her and said, is it okay if I partner with her? Because I think that they had made a pact to not partner with me. And she said yes. And then the three of us partnered together. So we never actually had a conversation, but I
Some
think
work was done.
some work was done. I think what you're saying is me not wanting absolution or that, or
Mhm.
just, you know, like, I think there's more listening to you that I definitely could have done. But I also feel like just staying in my own lane and really sitting with that. And I hear it now when I'm with other people. I hear how people lose historical context.
Yeah.
And I also work to keep it conscious inside of me. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but it is important to keep historical context, and to not just because something's familiar to me in life giving, that it doesn't have severe implications for someone else. And I think
Yeah.
that, but I think the process of her going to the teaching team instead of to me, and having that boundary there actually really helped me have to sit with myself.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. But I think that it could have gone in a more conscious and deliberate way listening to you.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not unhappy about how it went, but I have thought recently about reaching out to her because she's someone
Yeah.
I actually really liked. Do you know what I mean? We liked each
Yeah.
other in the beginning, like,
Yeah. I think what's interesting here is like listening to you talk about this. I'm like thinking of how many times um I'm thinking of a lot of things, especially as a Black person. Because if I'm unhealed or if I'm not pursuing healing, I think there's also a celebration that this person felt comfortable enough to share their rage a little bit.
yeah.
Because a lot of times, we get labeled real quickly as the angry Black woman or whatever, but like um their anger and rage and annoyance was able to exist here.
Hmm.
And that doesn't happen. And I hope that that was a minimum, um, a space where their dignity got to be held and they weren't
Hmm.
penalized or like branded or named
Right.
a certain thing for having an emotional response. Um, so I'm gonna celebrate that, and I would encourage you to reach out to her.
I'm thinking about it. Because I've grown so much since then, and
Yeah.
I understand it even more deeply today. And um, yeah, I yeah, I haven't decided yet what I would say. If you have any recommendations, I'd love to hear.
I am a wordsmith in that space. I would definitely reach out and be like, I was having a conversation and I wanted to know if there's ever a possibility to reconnect
Mm,
because you said like some work happened. So you don't want to make it like I want to talk and hash this out again.
right,
It's more like I would love for a chance to reconnect. I thought about you. I wanted to know how you were doing and see what the response is without
nice,
bringing up the harm.
right.
Um,
Thanks.
she got her licks in a little bit, you know what I'm saying? She got her licks
Yeah.
in with the pad. She got some licks in. So like just check in and see what the
Nice.
room is there or what the space looks like or what the response is. Cause if she's still repelling you, then that's okay. We talk about not being like
Yeah.
nice, but being kind. And like if she's honestly still repelling you, then that just tells me that maybe you're not in the same spaces
Right.
around your growth or um and maybe she doesn't want to have tenderness towards you or white folks. I
Absolutely.
don't know what her journey has looked like in terms of the
Right.
last 10 years, but I think um just opening up the space and saying, "Hey, um I was doing some work and I thought of you and I would love to see if we can reconnect."
Great.
If you don't hear nothing, there's an answer.
Yeah, exactly.
If she's like, "Yeah, let's connect." And you can kind of feel that hesitancy, then tread lightly. Don't bring it up. You just be like curious about her life and what's been happening and just say, just I want to hear about you and here's what's been going on in my life if she's open and willing. And then there's like she may be like, "All right, let's get right into it," right?
Right.
Like she may do that. But just kind of giving her the space to lead and feeling it out, like and not making her lead, but also like giving
Mm.
her the space to talk about it or not talk about it.
Hmm.
And I think a
Awesome.
lot of times that can be like, oh, um, hey, I know we had some challenge and tension here about 10 years ago. I was thinking about you and I'm really loving how I'm glad to see you successful. Um, we can talk about this or we can't. Like not on the initial, but like
Right, right, right,
we
right,
could
right.
talk about this or we can't. I'm always open to talking to you about that. Um, but I'm really interested in like how you're doing and reconnecting. Like,
Nice.
so you can always throw it out there and then say, that's another option. You could throw it out there and just say, and you don't ever have to talk about any of that with me. Just giving people an out and a caveat is really nice. It's
Nice,
really nice
thank you.
sometimes. Yeah. I'm excited to hear back about if y'all connect in the
I just
Patreon. We'll go up about it and see. Maybe we have some like really cool situational hot seats that lead to reconnection. That would be
Mhm.
cool. Okay.
All
Well,
right.
thank you so much for being here and being present and just sharing some of your life and radiance with me as you always do. Thank you for being a non-negotiable stand for life and radiance and consequently my life and radiance. I appreciate you. And I would love to close um, with a brief collective power moment. If you can just kind of walk us through what that looks like. And if you're able and you're seated, then join us.
Maybe not collective power. I think that's a lot to ask, but I'll do some kind of stillness and
Yeah,
awakening.
I
Right?
love
Does that
that.
sound good?
That
Okay.
sounds great.
All right. And thank you very much for having me. And I love you and thanks. So, all right. So if you are sitting down, I just ask that you cross your ankles and your wrists. That's a way to bring inner attentiveness. And it automatically, without working on it, brings your attention more inward. When I say inward, I don't mean hiding inward, but investigating what's living inside of you. So just take a moment and take a deep breath in and slowly exhale and be in awe of the fact that the source of life for all of creation, we could call it the ocean of love, eternal love, and that a drop of that eternal love is radiating inside you as your soul or spirit currency. It's literally your life energy. And it actually breathes, or like the ocean, it fluctuates through your cerebral spinal fluid. So just be in wonder that your soul is radiating inside of you with expansion and contraction. And as you tune your attention and imagine sitting against your own spine, that you begin to become receptive to that radiant energy. That radiant, impartial love, where you don't have to prove, defend, hustle, grind. Rather, become receptive to and be informed by, and to honor the gift it's giving you to live. And just resting in your back. I always say so much of us are forward facing towards the world, but resting in your back and softening your back lets you be informed by your ancestors and the walk you've taken to be here in this moment. And as we tune into this inner vibrant stillness, let us awaken to what is natural in this living energy, that we're interdependent and interconnected. There isn't hierarchy here. There isn't divisiveness here. There is unity that can hold difference without sanitizing oppression. And just imagine for a moment that you're a tree in a very diverse forest where your roots are intertwining with very diverse trees, and the strongest support the weakest and communicate disease to everyone, so it doesn't like discern what kind of tree you are. It's just there's a natural instinctual intention for life to thrive, and that's also true inside of us when we can get deep. And when we become part of this collective root system, we lose that socially informed, social system informed individuality. And call forth the radiance of all living beings to inform the truth of our health together. And then bring one hand on your heart, one hand below your belly button, and just take a moment and be grateful for yourself. Be grateful for the gift of your life. Tune into that one river of life that is who you are and informs who we are. And take a deep breath in and slowly exhale. All righty. How's that for you, Karen?
Thanks. Give everybody a little love and a little meditation. That's stillness is something that I search for. And this is a slow burn. And I think it's the same thing. So like if you're a vibe, you're like, it's slower. It's like a fire pit, like all of the processes of that. And thank you for bringing, your vulnerability and just yourself. Like I can always count on you being true to yourself in this space. And I don't know other iterations of you throughout this lifetime, but the 4 or 5 years that I've known you, I'm grateful that every time I get you in this authentic and beautiful way. And so I'm so grateful for you and all the work that has yet to come and what's possible. And to that, I will tell all the listeners to be gentle with each other and to be gentle with yourselves. And I hope that this was generative and life-giving for you to listen to us. UnifyingSolutions.com. I know that's where we can find Suzanne. Suzanne at UnifyingSolutions.com is her email. And yeah, I just think that and you're using they exclusively, so pardon my her. I'm learning that, and that's my bad. But yeah, get in touch with Suzanne if you're ready to do some work and unpack the ways that it lives inside of you. White supremacy lives inside of you. Adaptive strategies. And if you call on the Anti-Racism Collective, then me and Dr. Sierra will join, but don't come to us with no mess.
Exactly.
If you're not ready,
the mess.
if you're not ready,
right.
As we said, repair is a long process. So we're in for the repair if everyone is committed to the repair. So that's how you get a hold of us, UnifyingSolution.com. You can check out all the offerings there. Some of these Polarity, do the pathways. I'm still learning it. Pathways.
Pathway to living liberation.
Yeah, like if you're interested in Polarity or this has really resonated with you, check out the UnifyingSolutions.com website, and there's a Polarity link. You can click on that and find out a little bit more, or you can talk to either one of us about that. And the teaching team is awesome. If you want to do individual sessions, we have 4 people that can, 4 or 5, maybe 5, I think, that could do Polarity sessions. And so individual coaching, sometimes that's what we need before we can be in a space with others, and that's totally okay. But there's lots of options for this, and whichever one you decide would be a choice into connecting with your livingness. So I'm excited. Be gentle with each other, be gentle with yourselves, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Karen.